The Senate chamber descended into a tense, expectant silence as Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett made her way toward the podium. Each step echoed across the marbled floor, her composure unshaken despite the thick atmosphere of political hostility surrounding her. Just moments earlier, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell had unleashed a scathing critique aimed directly at the freshman representative, calling her alarmingly unqualified and mocking her legal career as more theater than substance. The 79-year-old senator from Kentucky stood rigidly near his desk, arms folded across his chest, that familiar, thin smirk curling at the corner of his mouth. To him, this was sport, a public test of dominance he'd played and won countless times before. He expected Crockett to fumble, to retreat into uncertainty under the weight of his experience and the Senate's formal scrutiny. What he didn't know was that Jasmine Crockett, a seasoned criminal defense attorney long before her election to Congress, had come prepared for far more than political theater. As the television cameras zoomed in, broadcasting the scene live to millions across the nation, she placed a neat stack of documents onto the podium, organized, annotated, and deliberate. Her expression was calm, unreadable. Within the next few minutes, those very papers would transform McConnell's confident smirk into a look of restrained panic. This was not going to be another forgettable exchange of partisan rhetoric. It was about to become a masterclass in precision, restraint, and intellect, the kind of moment that would be replayed across every news network, dissected on every political panel, and remembered as the day Jasmine Crockett turned an attempted public humiliation into Mitch McConnell's most disastrous miscalculation of the year. Before diving deeper into this confrontation, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel, because this is where legal intellect meets political power in real time. Crockett's rise to prominence had never followed the traditional path. At 41, the Harvard-educated attorney had already built an impressive legacy defending civil rights and constitutional protections across Texas courtrooms. Her reputation as a fearless advocate, sharp-tongued, unflinchingly direct, and fiercely principled, had made her one of the most formidable new voices in Congress. "She doesn't talk like a politician," one congressional reporter once noted. "She cross-examines her opponents as if the chamber were her courtroom." Mitch McConnell, on the other hand, was the embodiment of establishment politics. With nearly 4 decades in the Senate, he had perfected the art of procedural manipulation and political brinksmanship. His colleagues often compared his strategic patience to that of a chess master. Slow, calculating, and lethal. His nickname, the Turtle, though given mockingly by some, perfectly encapsulated his cautious but relentless style. The confrontation between them erupted during what was supposed to be a routine joint session on judicial appointments. Normally, such meetings were bureaucratic formalities, but McConnell, ever the tactician, saw an opening, a chance to undermine a rising progressive figure on national television. He seized it without hesitation. "We have members like Representative Crockett," McConnell began, his Kentucky drawl heavy with condescension, "who claim legal expertise yet demonstrate a fundamental misunderstanding of constitutional law. Perhaps that's why her legal career was so brief before she sought refuge in the protective walls of Congress." The room tensed instantly. Gasps, shifting chairs, muffled whispers. Everyone understood what was happening. This wasn't about policy. It was about power. McConnell wasn't just targeting Crockett. He was sending a message to the new wave of reformist lawmakers threatening the Senate's traditional hierarchy. Know your place. For Crockett, the stakes couldn't have been higher. As a black woman in Congress, and one of the few with a strong legal pedigree, allowing such a public insult to go unanswered wasn't an option. She knew what was expected of her: deference, apology, retreat. But she chose something else entirely: confrontation, backed by truth. "Thank you for yielding time, Madam Speaker," Crockett began, her tone even and deliberate. "I appreciate Senator McConnell's concerns about my professional qualifications, though I must admit, I'm flattered by the amount of research he's apparently done on me." A ripple of quiet laughter swept through the chamber. Even a few senators hiding their amusement behind stoic expressions couldn't suppress their smiles. McConnell didn't move, but the smirk on his face stiffened. "I'd like to address the senator's claims directly," Crockett continued. "But before I do, I'd like to raise a point of parliamentary inquiry. Is it considered appropriate for a member of this body to question another member's credentials without presenting any factual basis?" The speaker hesitated, glancing around before responding carefully. "The chair reminds all members to maintain decorum and to direct remarks toward policy rather than personal character." McConnell leaned forward, voice dripping with practiced politeness. "Point of order, Madam Speaker. I made no personal attack. I merely noted the representative's limited familiarity with constitutional interpretation, as her previous comments have demonstrated. Crockett's eyes glinted with recognition. She had anticipated this. Excellent, she replied. Then we're discussing constitutional understanding. I'll confine my remarks accordingly. She reached for the top document in her stack. Since Senator McConnell has questioned my knowledge of constitutional law, I've taken the liberty of reviewing some of his own public statements on the subject. The air shifted instantly. A low murmur rippled through the Senate gallery as reporters leaned forward. Pens ready. In 2016, she began, lifting a printed transcript. Senator McConnell argued that Supreme Court nominations should not proceed during an election year. The justification used to block Judge Merrick Garland's confirmation. She paused. He claimed the Constitution implied that the American people should have their say first. She lowered her gaze slightly, eyes locking on McConnell. Of course, the Constitution says no such thing. She turned to the next page. Yet, in 2020, under nearly identical circumstances, the senator reversed course entirely, fast-tracking Justice Barrett's confirmation just weeks before the election. When questioned, he cited, and I quote, historical precedent. But inconsistent application of principle is not precedent, Senator. It's opportunism. Soft gasps filled the chamber. McConnell's allies exchanged uneasy glances. Even his longtime confidant seemed unsure how to intervene. Crockett continued, voice unwavering. As for trial experience, I've personally tried more than 100 cases to verdict, and overseen hundreds more as managing attorney. My constitutional arguments have been upheld by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. By comparison, I understand Senator McConnell's private legal practice lasted approximately 6 weeks before entering politics. Point of order, a Republican senator interjected sharply. The representative is veering into personal commentary. Crockett's tone remained cool. I'm simply clarifying the factual record regarding professional experience. The very topic Senator McConnell raised. The speaker nodded. Proceed, Representative Crockett, but please focus on substantive matters. Gladly, she said. Here, I have compiled a 15-year analysis of the senator's public statements regarding judicial appointments. In 17 instances, his interpretations of constitutional principles directly contradict his prior positions. The tension became palpable. McConnell's face had lost all expression. The chamber's hum faded into total silence. Would the senator prefer I review each contradiction in sequence? Crockett asked evenly. Or shall I limit myself to the 3 most consequential, beginning with those that shaped the current Supreme Court? McConnell shifted, finally reaching for his microphone. Madam Speaker, perhaps we might move to the day's actual business rather than this performance. Crockett smiled faintly. Of course, Senator. I'll be submitting my full analysis for the official record. She gathered the papers neatly, then held up one final document. Before we conclude, though, you mentioned congressional immunity. This, she said, lifting the brief, is the amicus filing I authored in Williams v. Texas Department of Criminal Justice, a case that established new constitutional safeguards for defendants facing capital punishment. The Fifth Circuit cited my arguments 9 separate times. Her voice hardened slightly, every syllable deliberate. I didn't come to Congress seeking immunity, Senator McConnell. I came here to defend the same Constitution I upheld in courtrooms across Texas, a Constitution now too often compromised by political expediency. And that, I assure you, is something I am profoundly qualified to address. The room went completely still. 3 long seconds of silence stretched across the chamber. An eternity in political time. McConnell's face was pale, his jaw rigid. The legendary poker face that had survived decades of Senate battles had finally cracked. Then came the closing blow, a moment destined to echo through every political replay of the week. Crockett gathered her documents into one precise stack, turned toward McConnell, and spoke with quiet authority. Senator, you've served this chamber for nearly 40 years, and I respect that longevity. But tenure is not the same as fidelity to constitutional principle. When you claimed I misunderstand the Constitution, you offered this body an opportunity to revisit what those principles truly mean. She lifted the papers in her hands. And these, she said, her voice steady and sharp as glass, are not my interpretations, Senator. These are your own words contradicting each other across time, depending on which party controlled the White House. McConnell remained frozen in place, his typically expressive eyebrows unnaturally still, clearly calculating how to respond without digging a deeper hole. The C-SPAN camera caught his legislative director frantically writing notes, which an aide attempted to deliver. But McConnell waved him off without looking away from Crockett. The Constitution isn't a political weapon to be reinterpreted when convenient, Crockett continued, her voice gaining strength, but maintaining that lawyer's precision that had captivated the chamber. It's the foundation of our government and deserves consistent respect, something I've dedicated my legal career to upholding. He turned slightly toward the gallery, where citizen visitors watched from above. The American people deserve representatives who approach constitutional questions with consistency, not convenience. When we read our founding document as a partisan tool, we undermine its very purpose. The chamber erupted with reactions. Democrats openly nodding in agreement, while Republicans shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Senator Romney was seen leaning over to whisper something to Senator Collins, who nodded gravely. One Democratic representative spontaneously applauded before quickly stopping herself. McConnell finally moved to his microphone. "Madam Speaker, But before he could continue, Crockett delivered her final point with the timing of a seasoned litigator landing her closing argument. "If the senator would like to debate constitutional law with me, I'm available anytime. My office door is always open. But I would suggest coming prepared with consistent principles rather than political expedients." The gallery, which had been instructed to maintain silence, couldn't contain a collective ooh that rippled through the visitors section. A young law student in the back whispered loudly enough to be heard. She just cross-examined McConnell like he was on the witness stand. McConnell's face flushed deep red, spreading visibly from his collar to his forehead. For a man whose nickname, the Turtle, referred partly to his impassive expressions. This physical reaction revealed just how deeply Crockett's precision had penetrated his political armor. He was Mitch McConnell, the minority leader, the master tactician who had outmaneuvered presidents and shaped the Supreme Court for generations. Yet in this moment, he appeared completely outmatched by the freshman representative who had brought courtroom skills to a political fight. The Senate minority leader cleared his throat once, twice the microphone, amplifying his discomfort throughout the chamber. Several senior Republican senators looked away, clearly embarrassed for their leader. "Madam Speaker," he finally managed, his voice noticeably tighter than his usual controlled draw. "I withdraw my earlier comments about their representatives' qualifications. It wasn't an apology." McConnell never apologized, but in the world of congressional politics, it was tantamount to surrender. The Senate minority leader, who had built his reputation on never backing down, had just publicly retreated. The speaker recognized his withdrawal with a nod. "The senator's comments are withdrawn from the record." Crockett simply nodded. "Thank you, Senator. I appreciate your reconsideration." The restraint in her response demonstrated a political maturity that further highlighted the contrast between her evidence-based approach and McConnell's now deflated tack. As she gathered her documents, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez could be seen mouthing wow to her colleague Ilhan Omar. Even Republican Representative Dan Crenshaw was caught in camera giving a reluctant nod of professional respect. As Crockett returned to her seat, colleagues reached out to touch her arm or shoulder insolent support. C-SPAN cameras followed her, capturing the moment of triumph that would soon spread across every social media platform in America. Representative Maxine Waters leaned in to whisper something that made Crockett smile briefly. McConnell remained at his desk, uncharacteristically still, his legislative director still trying to pass him notes that remained unread. His legendary ability to brush off political damage and immediately pivot to the next maneuver temporarily short-circuited by the precision of Crockett's counter. In the press gallery, reporters were already frantically typing on their phones. One veteran congressional correspondent whispered to her colleague in 20 years covering Congress, "I've never seen McConnell caught this flat-footed." Outside in the hallway, Senator Chuck Schumer was caught on a hot mic telling his aide, "Did you see that? She just gave a masterclass in constitutional litigation on the Senate floor." McConnell never saw it coming. As the chamber moved to its next order of business, the energy remained electric. Everyone present understood they had witnessed not just a personal triumph, but a potential shift in how constitutional debates would unfold in Congress going forward. The old guard had just been put on notice. Rhetorical flourishes and seniority would no longer shield them from substantive constitutional challenges. Within minutes of the exchange, clips of Crockett's methodical takedown flooded social media. The Senate press gallery emptied as reporters rushed to file their stories. Number Crockett v. McConnell began trending nationally within 15 minutes, quickly followed by number McConnell frozen, number constitutional clapback, and the particularly viral number Crocketted McConnell, a play on her name that became the caption for countless memes showing her document stack alongside McConnell's reamed face. Breaking Rep. Jasmine Crockett just schooled Mitch McConnell. With his own words, the Hill's headline blared. While CNN went with the more measured but equally dramatic constitutional showdown, McConnell forced to withdraw claims against Rep. Crockett. After legal counter, political commentators across the spectrums scrambled to analyze what many were calling a defining generational shift in congressional power dynamics. CNN hastily assembled a panel, including former federal prosecutors and constitutional scholars. What we witnessed today wasn't just a freshman representative defending herself, explained political analyst Terry Hansen in the hastily assembled special report. This was a former trial attorney demonstrating exactly why legal experience matters in Congress. Crockett didn't just respond to McConnell. She cross-examined his entire approach to constitutional interpretation. The analyst displayed a split screen showing Crockett's precise references to McConnell's previous statements alongside his increasingly uncomfortable reactions. "Look at his body language here," she pointed out. "McConnell is one of the most disciplined communicators in Washington, yet he's visibly rattled." That's how effectively she dismantled his position. Conservative outlets struggled to frame the exchange. While some initially attempted to portray Crockett as disrespectful to a senior senator, the precision of her legal arguments and the respectful tone she maintained made this narrative difficult to sustain. By evening, even Fox News had shifted from critiquing her approach to discussing the substantive constitutional questions she had raised. McConnell picked the wrong representative to attack, admitted conservative commentator Michael Stevenson Fox's evening broadcast. "If you're going to question someone's legal credentials, maybe don't choose the Harvard Law graduate with an actual constitutional litigation record. The senator would have been better served focusing on policy disagreements rather than qualifications." The primetime Fox host seemed uncharacteristically reflective. "There's a lesson here for the old guard in Washington. The new generation of representatives on both sides of the aisle aren't coming to learn the system. They're bringing professional expertise from the real world, and they're applying it to challenge how things have always been done." The political implications extended far beyond the single exchange. By nightfall, Crockett's office reported receiving messages of support from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, many privately, admitting they had grown frustrated with McConnell's selective constitutional interpretations, but lacked the legal background to challenge them effectively. More significantly, 3 moderate Republican senators who'd been wavering on an upcoming judicial confirmation suddenly announced their support for the nominee, a direct rebuke to McConnell's opposition. Senator Lisa Murkowski issued a statement that pointedly referenced the need for consistent constitutional standards in evaluating judicial nominees. "Today created a permission structure for challenging McConnell's constitutional framing," explained Senate insider Rebecca Morrison on MSNBC. "For years, his word on constitutional matters was treated as gospel within his caucus. Crockett didn't just stand up to him. She exposed the inconsistency of his positions in a way that's giving cover to others who want to break from his control." Behind closed doors, the impact was even more dramatic. A senior Democratic senator confided to reporters that several committee meetings had been hastily rescheduled. "Republicans are regrouping," the senator explained. "They just realized their standard constitutional objections might face a similar scrutiny." Now for McConnell, the damage control began immediately. His communications director issued a statement claiming his comments had been misinterpreted and that he welcomes robust constitutional debate. But then narrative had already escaped his control, a rare occurrence for the usually disciplined message master. His allies attempted to minimize the exchange. Senator John Cornyn told reporters, "This is just a momentary distraction. Senator McConnell has shaped constitutional interpretation in this chamber and the judiciary for decades. One exchange doesn't change that." But the defensive tone only underscored how significantly the dynamic had shifted. "The thing about McConnell is, he's accustomed to operating in a certain political environment," noted presidential historian Dr. Jameson Wright in an interview with The Atlantic. "He rose to power in an era where seniority and institutional position granted near immunity from certain types of challenges. Representatives like Crockett represent a new approach. They bring professional expertise and are unwilling to defer to political tradition when it conflicts with substantive principle." Wright compared the moment to earlier transitions in congressional history. There's always resistance when new voices challenge established power. What makes this remarkable is that Crockett won this round not through procedural maneuvers or political alliances, but through sheer substantive expertise. That's much harder for the old guard to counter. The exchange reverberated through Washington's power centers for days. President Biden referenced it obliquely during a press conference, noting that our Constitution benefits when defenders with real-world experience join the conversation. Former President Obama was more direct, tweeting, This is why electing people with diverse professional backgrounds matters. Different perspectives strengthen our democracy. Perhaps most tellingly, 3 senior Republican senators were overheard in the Capitol cafeteria, discussing a new approach to challenging Democratic judicial nominees. "We need substantive arguments, not procedural obstruction," one said. "McConnell's old playbook just got exposed. We look foolish if we keep switching constitutional positions every time the White House changes parties." Legal organizations across the political spectrum weighed in. The Conservative Federalist Society's executive director acknowledged in a statement that consistency and constitutional interpretation should transcend partisan objectives. While the Progressive American Constitution Society praised Crockett's masterful demonstration of how legal expertise can elevate congressional debate, law schools reported a surge in interest. Our admissions email received dozens of inquiries specifically mentioning Representative Crockett, said the dean of Howard University Law School. "Young people are seeing how legal training can translate to effective political advocacy." For Crockett herself, the aftermath brought both opportunity and challenge. Her constituent office was flooded with supportive messages and interview requests. Law schools invited her to speak on constitutional interpretation. Her fundraising numbers quadrupled overnight with small dollar donations flowing in from across the country. Her staff had to establish a special protocol just to manage the volume of legal briefs and constitutional analyses being sent to her office from attorneys nationwide. "People see her as a champion for constitutional consistency," explained her chief of staff. "They're sending resources to support future confrontations." But with higher profile came increased scrutiny. Conservative opposition researchers began digging into her legal career, looking for controversial cases or statements. Several right-wing outlets questioned why a freshman representative was disrespecting Senate traditions and grandstanding instead of learning how things work. Major legal databases reported unusual search patterns, as congressional staffers on both sides researched previous statements by their bosses, seemingly concerned about potential inconsistencies that might be exposed in future debates. Crockett addressed these criticisms directly in her first interview after the exchange. "Respect for institutions doesn't mean immunity from accountability," she told MSNBC's Rachel Maddow. "Senator McConnell is entitled to his opinions on constitutional matters. But when those opinions contradict each other depending on political convenience, that's not defending the Constitution. That's weaponizing it." When asked if she had anticipated McConnell's attack, Crockett revealed the preparation behind her poised response. "As a trial attorney, you learn to anticipate opposing arguments. When I came to Congress, I studied the constitutional statements of key leaders over time, noting inconsistencies. Not for confrontation's sake, but because understanding these patterns helps navigate the legislative process." 1 week after the exchange, as the dust began to settle, McConnell made a rare concession to reality. In a closed-door meeting with Republican senators, he acknowledged the need to refresh our constitutional messaging and suggested bringing in conservative legal scholars to help develop more consistent interpretations that can withstand scrutiny from opponents with legal backgrounds. For congressional observers, this subtle shift represented something remarkable. The Senate's most powerful obstructionist, recognizing that purely tactical constitutional arguments no longer went unchallenged. What Crockett really exposed wasn't just McConnell's inconsistency, concluded political scientist Dr. Alicia Martinez in an opinion piece for The Washington Post. She revealed that the emperor has no clothes. When constitutional principles are reduced to partisan tactics, they lose their moral authority. It took someone with actual constitutional litigation experience to make that clear. The long-term implications continued to unfold. Junior members in both chambers reported feeling newly empowered to challenge senior leadership on substantive grounds, rather than simply deferring to experience. Congressional staffers noted an uptick in requests for legal research before committee hearings, suggesting members were preparing more thoroughly for potential constitutional challenges. The House Judiciary Committee announced plans for a special session on constitutional interpretation in the legislative process, with Crockett named to lead the discussion. Even more significantly, the Senate Rules Committee began reviewing procedures for joint sessions with several members, suggesting more structured formats for substantive debate between chambers. And perhaps most tellingly, public polling showed a marked increase in voter interest about the constitutional qualifications of congressional candidates. Search trends revealed growing numbers of Americans researching their representatives' professional backgrounds, and legal expertise, suggesting a potential shift in voter priorities beyond party affiliation. News coverage increasingly highlighted the professional backgrounds of lawmakers with special attention to those who had practiced constitutional law. Voters are starting to ask different questions, noted pollster Nate Silver. They're less interested in how long someone's been in Washington, and more interested in what real-world expertise they bring to governance. This wasn't just about one freshman representative standing up to the Senate Minority Leader. It was about a fundamental shift in how constitutional debates would be conducted in Congress going forward. Less difference to political seniority, more emphasis on substantive expertise and consistency of principle. As one viral tweet summed it up, McConnell brought a political knife to a constitutional gunfight. Crockett was simply better armed. Their percussions would continue reshaping congressional dynamics long after the headlines faded, signaling a new chapter in the ongoing evolution of American governance, one where expertise increasingly challenges tradition and substantive knowledge rivals political power.